Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show, where we look at the upcoming election. Not a UK general election, which is surely looming, but the election for the next Speaker of the House of Commons. The present incumbent, John Bercow, has announced that he's standing down after a full 10 years in this ancient post, which stretches all the way back to 1377. Bercow is the 34th incumbent of the chair of the British House of Commons since the Treaty of Union with Scotland in 1707, and is one of the most famous and controversial. Speaker Bercow steps aside on November the 4th, and his successor is elected by exhaustive ballot of all MPs the same day. That means that November the 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, which commemorates a plot to blow up Parliament, becomes the new Speaker's first full day in post. However, in the view of his government detractors, it is John Bercow himself who's been placing the political gunpowder under the foundations of the House of Commons, with controversial rulings which have allowed backbench and opposition MPs to seize control of the parliamentary agenda, much to the angst of successive prime ministers. Just as one of his predecessors, George Thomas, became famous for his rich Welsh accent intoning "Order, order" on the first radio broadcasting of the House of Commons back in the 1970s, so John Bercow's verbal dexterity in the chair has made him something of a televisual superstar across the world. Today we ask two of the most experienced parliamentarians in the Palace of Westminster about the Mr. and Madam Speakers they have known, and who they tip for the next incumbent of the famous chair.
He likes the sound of his own voice. He likes to talk. I'm sure he's looking to his future.
I believe there needs to be a personality there, because for many people outside, the Speaker is the interface between Parliament and the people who follow on television.
But first, to your reactions to last week's show on Brexit's so-called Super Saturday. As we predicted, there was one final twist in the Brexit parliamentary melodrama, with Super Saturday ending in stalemate rather than triumph for Boris Johnson. This is what you had to say. First from Morag, who's worried about Scotland losing its chance to secure its European position. I hope to God we have an out, Morag says, but worried sick, we are too late. Gordon, writing, I think, from the Brexit point of view, he says, interesting to see if the people who have denied democracy already in Parliament once again say they do not trust the European Union. To have made a deal that's fair to the UK and to the EU, are they seriously going to say they do not think the deal is good, no matter what? As that says, they do not trust the EU, seizing on the point that the EU backed Boris's deal. And Scotia McNeely says, independence for Scotland, reunification of Ireland, Wales to become a country. And Sheena says, Britain will never have Ireland's best interests at heart. That's an old refrain, Sheena. England is greatly to blame.
The final twist in the plot was due to what we will term Speaker Bercow's last stand in the chair. First, he opened up the debate on Super Saturday from the government's original take it or leave it motion. This allowed senior former Tory MP Oliver Letwin to put down an amendment to ensure that the Prime Minister could not avoid the parliamentary instruction of sending an extension letter to the European Union. Faced with eating his own die-in-a-ditch rhetoric, Boris Johnson sent, but did not sign, his letter to the rest of Europe and tried to force the issue back onto Monday's business. But Bercow was ready for him once again. This is how he dismissed the government's arguments.
Today's circumstances are in substance the same as Saturday's circumstances. My ruling is therefore that the motion will not be debated today, as it would be repetitive and disorderly to do so. It is a necessary rule to ensure the sensible use of the House's time and proper respect for the decisions that it takes.
Now, it is said that a good Commons Speaker always leans towards the opposition, particularly when the government is strong. And many speakers have been the subject of government plots to shift them from the chair before their time. For example, the highly popular Bernard Weatherall was far too much of a wet Tory for the taste of Margaret Thatcher. However, no recent speaker has been as controversial and as loquacious as John Bercow. Famously in 1642, Mr. Speaker Lentil told Charles I that he had neither eyes to see nor tongue to speak, save for the direction of the House. John Bercow has turned that tradition on its head. Here are some of the highlights which have made him the most celebrated and most outspoken speaker of modern times.
Order! Order! Order. There's no need for the honourable member for Dewsbury to chunter ahoy there from a sedentary position. Very eccentric behaviour. Mr. Angus Brendan McNeill, calm yourself. You may be a cheeky chappie, but you're also an exceptionally noisy one. Mr. Lewis, get a grip of yourself, man. Calm. Take up yoga, you'll find it beneficial, man. Mr. Shelbrooke, be quiet. You are well-intentioned and principled, but you are overexcitable and you need to contain yourself. If it requires you to take some medicament, then so be it. Lie back and think of either England or Scotland and get used to it. Mr. Stewart, if you don't like it, you're perfectly entitled to your view. I couldn't give a flying flamingo what your view is. That sticker on the subject of Brexit happens to be affixed to or in the windscreen of my wife's car. Yes. And I'm sure the honourable gentleman wouldn't suggest for one moment that a wife is somehow the property or chattel of her husband. Colleagues, you really are a very, very, very generous bunch of people indeed. And thank you on both sides of the House for the expressions of support, which I richly appreciate. I love this place, you love this place.
Little wonder that a star turn on the international speaking circuit is said to await Mr. Bercow in his retirement. However, how does Bercow's style compare with other recent speakers? Alex asked two of the most experienced parliamentarians in Westminster, with contrasting views on Speaker Bercow, to assess his record.
Now, I'm now joined by Lord Daffyd Wigley and Kate Hoey, the Labour MP for Vauxhall. Now, can I turn to you, Daffyd, first, because you go right back to Speaker Selwyn Lloyd.
Oh, yes, I go back through history almost.
You're a young member. He was quite a Tory grandee. Did you find him intimidating?
He was very much. Of course, he was a former cabinet minister, and he had an air about him. It was 1974. It was a very tight parliament, a balanced parliament. It only lasted for 6 months. But he was very generous, and of course he had his family roots in my home county of Gwynedd, so that gave a slight advantage.
And then on to another Welshman, George Thomas. But you didn't have quite as even a relationship with Lord Tonopandi as he became.
George Thomas had been Secretary of State for Wales, and of course it was at the time when Plaid won its first seat, Gwynedd Evans coming in 1966, and George Thomas used to knock hell out of Plaid up and down Wales. So when he became Speaker, we weren't quite sure how we were going to relate to him, and we met him in the tea room, David Ellis Thomas, my colleague, and I, and he said, you know, you two boys, nothing will give me greater pleasure than seeing you two boys enter the chamber. And we thought the revolution was happening. Enter the chamber and have to bow to me.
But then, George Thomas became famous because he was the first recorded voice, just radio, of course,
yes.
In the chair.
His order became a clarion call across the networks, as it were. And he was, of course, he'd been a Labour MP, but he was perceived to be someone who was too close to the government in the time of the Thatcher government, and he wasn't too popular with some of his Labour members. There's a lovely story about him. When Dennis Skinner was taking some children around, school children around Parliament, and George Thomas came past, and he started talking to Dennis and said, Dennis, aren't you going to introduce me to these nice young boys? And Dennis just threw his thumb over his shoulder, kids, Lord Andy Pandy.
But then your first speaker was Bernard Weatherall, a totally different type of person, a very, very nice gentleman.
Yes, and I came in a by-election, so he was particularly, I don't know whether they did it to all by-election winners in those days, but he was particularly nice to myself. And William Hague had come in just a few months earlier, and he had both of us in to have a cup of tea and talk to me about
cake. He was famous for dishing out cake.
Yes, no, I think looking back on it, yes, there was cake too. And I remember thinking, gosh, you know, because you come in as a new MP and all these, you don't know anybody really, and everybody ignores you after the first few hours, you know, and he just made it, you know, he went through some things and he was so kind really that I remember thinking, what a lovely gentleman. He looked so patriarchal, you know, and it was a very nice welcome to Parliament, which I presume speakers do it still, but I'm not so sure that it would be quite the same welcome from the current speaker.
And then, of course, after Benawello, the only lady speaker thus far, the formidable Betty Boothroyd.
Yes.
Did you have some arguments with her?
I think Betty Boothroyd is our most wonderful speaker we've ever had, and I would have her back tomorrow. But I did, when I was a minister, there was this idea that you should never obviously announce anything in the radio in the morning until it had been announced in Parliament, and she took that very seriously. And of course, when I was Sports Minister, I was kind of, I suppose looking back on it, set up by the Secretary of State, who, I won't say who it was.
One of your colleagues.
One of my colleagues. And I had to go on radio in the morning and say something about one of the announcements we were making about, it was to do with Wembley. And this got raised by another member, and she really had, I had to sit there, and while she knew that it wasn't me, she had a real, you know, thing about Parliament needing to be told these things first. And then later that day I got a call from her office and she said to come up and see her. And I went up and saw her, and I was quite upset by it because, you know, you're publicly sort of told off by the speaker. And then she was just so lovely and said, you know, why she'd done it, and she knew it wasn't me, and she was really lovely. But Betty, I think what I liked about Betty was her style. You know, I felt she just epitomized all the really lovely things about being feminine and being a woman, and yet being in control of Parliament.
And of course, there was this persistent suggestion with her colourful background. She'd been a Tiller girl, but she hadn't really been a Tiller girl, had she?
No, I don't think she had, but that was a great line for people to see. I mean, I think she enjoyed dancing, and she enjoyed all sorts of things. I mean, she was a very, very sociable speaker, and I think did a lot more, started more of the sort of entertaining and making sure that members felt the speakers, all their beautiful place that she lives in, was able to be used by people to come in, and she was very, very good at involving people too. And of course, she hosted the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen. I'm not sure whether you were at that,
I was there,
and I was invited to that, and that was, you know, because there weren't that many people, and I felt quite privileged that I'd been invited.
So this slap-up dinner with the Queen and the Speaker, so you were there as well?
Yes, I was indeed. It was a fascinating dinner. Of course, Tony Blair and John Major were both there. It was very interesting to watch Tony Blair. He seemed to be a little bit shy, diffident in dealing with the Queen. And Robin Cook was around, of course. And Robin Cook, when the Queen saw Robin Cook there, she said, Robin, what's the form in the races tomorrow? And the whole thing lightened up. It was fascinating to see people relaxed with her in that way.
Join us after the break, where our experienced parliamentarians take a look at John Berco's impact after 10 years in the chair of the House of Commons. Join us then. Welcome back as Alex continues his interview with Lord Daffyd Wigley and Kate Hoey MP on who is most likely to succeed the redoubtable John Bercow as Speaker of the House of Commons.
Betty Boothroyd, you didn't have quite as good a relationship, perhaps, with Betty on occasion as Kate did.
Well, I have a great respect for her, and she's just passed her 90th birthday. There was all-round applause in the House of Lords when that happened, and she's a colleague on the crossbench group where I sit in the House of Lords. But no, I put her in a totally invidious position. There'd been an order dealing with things relating to Wales, and Plaid hadn't been called. So I protested, and she ruled that my protest was out of order, and I said, I don't accept your ruling. The red card immediately came out, and I was expelled and suspended for a while.
Are you saying that was a premeditated act of disobedience,
Yes,
Lord Wigley?
Yes, it was. It was totally, and that's what's important. Never get sent out or have a row when you've lost your temper. do it when you're doing it for a purpose. And the purpose I was doing was to highlight the fact that one of the four parties in Wales wasn't getting a shout on a matter relating to Wales alone.
And how was your protest regarded back in the Valley?
Oh, it was brilliant. I mean, I was suspended twice in that way. Once on the basis of a sheep meat regime over Britain, and the other time on Welsh local government. And on the sheep meat regime, I got a letter from the NFU thanking me for making the stand, you know. So that provided you're doing it and it's transparent why you're doing it, it underlines the need next time that all parties get an opportunity.
But don't I recall an incident concerning the actual chair? I don't mean who's in the chair, I'm talking about the furniture.
Well, that was a different type of protest. There was a filibuster going on in relation to, if I remember right, Enoch Powell's Unborn Children Protection Bill, which I was very much against. And we were running a filibuster to try and talk it out. And the Speaker, Harold Walker, Deputy Speaker, called a closure earlier than we expected him to. I went up to the chair and I banged the side of the chair. For goodness sake, Mr. Deputy Speaker, hit it. And the arm of the chair shot up into the air. And there were ooh-ahs all around the chamber.
Well, there would be.
There would be, yes. Anyway, I went out to the central lobby afterwards. All the press gathered round. They said, what was all that about? I said, oh, it's quite simple, really. There was a loose screw in the chair. And they wrote it up as if I was referring to Harold Walker. So I had to make an apology the next week.
Well, I mean, I remember breaking the rules once or twice, but I never broke the furniture. Now, and the next speaker was, of course, Michael Martin. How was your relationship with Michael Martin?
Well, it was okay at the beginning. He just, you know, and he was a Labour speaker, and we got on all right with him. But then, of course, we had this problem over the expenses scandal, and I tried on a very normal day getting up and asking him to allow the police to come in and investigate some of the issues that have been going on. And he went berserk. I mean, he literally went berserk at me and went on about how he'd watched me on Sky News Channel expounding pearls of wisdom at midnight or something, and he just was so personal. And I kind of was shocked and sat back down again and hadn't realised just how much that a lot of other people had picked it up. I went back to my office and the media were just on it, and it was the beginning of the end of Michael Martin then, because he really had proved in a way that he wasn't prepared to really look into some of the terrible things that were going on to do with the expenses scandal.
Yeah, of course, it should be said that you know, Michael Martin didn't create the situation.
Not, but
and it had run on for a long, long time, and was a fundamentally nice man. But I think he found that whole issue very difficult. You rightly said it brought about his demise as Speaker. But that brings us on to his successor, which is John Bercow, still the Speaker of the House of Commons. Now, for some, a great parliamentary champion of backbench rights. For others, a fanatical pro-European who's pursued a bias in the chair. Now, which is it, Lord Wicklow?
Well, quite clearly, I would take the side of the members of Parliament against the executive. And as the executive is driving the Brexit through, I'm all in favour of a speaker that ensures that the other side has at least fair play. Now, then, he has become quite a film star in his own right. I was on holiday in continental Europe and the people were talking about him. How is Mr. Bercow and all the rest? So he has made a name for himself. I understand that people on the other side of the argument might not quite see it in the same light.
We're talking about the other side of the argument,
Yeah.
Kate Hoy?
Well, I mean, I did say, and I said to him personally when I heard at the very beginning that he had supported Remain, I said to him, I remember quite clearly saying to him, I do expect you, and I'm sure you will be impartial. And I've been actually genuinely shocked just how much he has become part of the pro-EU group within Parliament, and has done things that and broken conventions and in order to get through or to stop things happening. But also, I think his real failure with me is that he has become. He likes the sound of his own voice. He likes to talk. I'm sure he's looking to his future in terms of making huge amounts of money, going off to America and giving lecture tours. And I just think he has brought the speaker's kind of dignity and impartiality really into disrepute, and I would say that to him if he was listening.
You are.
I'm saying it to him.
But isn't it an argument that the rulings that John Bercow has given, very uncomfortable for the government and also not to the liking of Brexiteers, but nonetheless, in many senses, they have been upheld in the courts, in the sense that the courts have upheld majority in Parliament. And none of Berco's rulings would have mattered at all if there hadn't been a majority in Parliament to back them up.
Yeah, I think he probably overstretched himself. Initially, he did what a lot of MPs wanted, which was to give backbenchers more say, and that was right. But he then introduced private notice questions, which can be put in by anyone, and literally now you could get a private notice question on the weather. You know, he's given them over and over again. He then allows everybody who stands to speak, so it goes on for a long, long time. So the business of sometimes the actual business gets reduced, and I think he has played that card of wanting to look like he's always got the backbencher first, but actually in the end, you know, the government and the opposition have to be, I think, treated fairly, and I don't think that's happened. And you see, he was Speaker during a Labour government for a short time, and he never gave private notice questions. You look up, the library will show it, how few he gave to when there was a Labour government. And he really became, having been supposedly a Conservative, and then he got the Labour vote, he then became, I think, quite biased. And, you know, I do think as Speaker, you want to know that the Speaker is there and that they're not using their personal political views in terms of what's happening in Parliament.
Yeah, in many ways, of course, it's analogous to a referee in a football match, isn't it? The best referees are those that you don't see.
Yes.
and you don't notice.
And that's what they used to say about speakers, isn't it? To be heard.
Yeah,
To be...
indeed, and that is the role. Nonetheless, the role of the Speaker is to defend the backbench Member of Parliament, whichever side. And it shouldn't be a party political thing. And of course, the polarisation on Brexit has made it that much more difficult. But I hope that every Speaker that does come there does take that role very seriously indeed, because the defence of the ordinary backbench Member of Parliament against the Executive and against all the other pressures when they're doing their job, that is the most important thing of all.
Also, there was that extraordinary incident back in 2015 where William Hague, in one of his last acts, I think as a parliamentarian, tried to change the rules to basically get rid of John Bercow, and was stopped by the Commons.
Oh yes, and he would, I imagine, even today, if there was a vote, he would still be, because Labour are determined.
Perhaps time for another woman speaker, Harriet Harman, Meg Hillier, Eleanor Lang, and Rosie Winterton. That's a fairly formidable foursome to choose from for another lady speaker.
I will not be voting for Speaker for someone on the basis of their gender. I'll be voting on whether I think they'll actually do a good job, and I probably would not be supporting any of those four.
And have you been to any of the hustings which have been taking place? That's a bit of an innovation.
No, there was a big one there was a big one recently which I didn't get to. But it is good for people to, and I think they even had a hustings with the press gallery, as if the press were going to choose who the Speaker is.
Well, heaven forbid.
Well, I thought that you're in the fortunate position of loftily regarding this election from your vantage point in the House of Lords, Daffod. But what do you think of the quality? And do some of the male candidates have the qualities you're looking for? There's another Welshman in there.
Well, yes, I wouldn't deem it fit that I pass an opinion on them. I'm not in that chamber. We have our own election of the House of Lords for Speaker. Norman Fowler is the Speaker at this point in time. But I would be looking, if I was still there, for someone who has the strength to stand up against the Executive, because there will be many, many times when the Executive, whichever party is in power, they will try to railroad things through and try to lean on the Speaker. So that is very, very strong. I believe there needs to be a personality there, because for many people outside, the Speaker is the interface between Parliament and the people who follow on television. So that, yes, you don't want to have somebody who is play acting and playing to the gallery all the time, but you need somebody with enough of a personality to register and to have a presence and a voice and a sense of humour.
And a sense of humour. I agree with you very much
so
on that.
important when things are boiling up. This is what George Thomas was great at. When things were boiling up, he would say something amusing. Everybody would fall around laughing, and they'd have forgotten why they were arguing. And that is certainly an advantage.
I think Betty Boothroyd was able to do that as well.
It wasn't amusing like I name Daffod Wigley.
Well,
We'd all cheer.
Yes, and you duly go out and go back for 7 days to your constituency and mind your own business, as it were. But that rule has to be there, clearly, because there will be people like I was in a bygone age, perhaps standing up and making a nuisance of myself.
As a last question, and of the speakers you've known, I think I know what the answer is from what you've said. Who's your favourite of the ones you've experienced as the case?
Oh, I would have to go for Betty Boothroyd. Just. I think way above many of the other speakers that I've known, and I can't go back as far as you, Daffod, but
And yourself, Daffod, from that long range of speakers?
Yes, I wasn't in, of course, with John Bercow, so it would be wrong for me to be casting an opinion on him. I don't think that George Thomas, although he was a very successful speaker, I don't think that he did many good turns to Parliament as an institution. He was the greatest personality that I saw. Betty Boothroyd was in another way. Those two in different ways. But I wouldn't like to rule which one I'd put top of the pops out of them. What's important is you get somebody there that is doing a job for Parliament, for democracy, and it's a very, very important job to be undertaken.
Absolutely.
Well, Lord Wigley, Kate Hoy, I hope you've said enough today to get you one of these invites back to the Speaker's House with Her Majesty the Queen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Loathe him or love him, John Bercow will be a very hard act to follow. Members of the government and hard Brexiteers will be cheering his leaving of the chair. They regard him as a Remainer Speaker who has torn up the Commons rulebook to frustrate Brexit. His supporters retort that no Speaker in history has done more to enhance the role of backbenchers than John Bercow, and that he has bravely fulfilled his fundamental duty of allowing the legislature to do its job of scrutinising the executive. In any event, no one can doubt that Mr. Speaker Bercow, like Frank Sinatra, has done things his way. He will be much in demand to stage many encores on many platforms to reveal just what it was like to be Mr. Speaker amidst the great political storm of Brexit. No occupant of the chair in living memory has matched Speaker Bercow's oratorical skills, and no Speaker has been as interventionist and innovative in his rulings. His departure will be a huge relief for the Prime Minister and cause much grief among the Europhiles. One thing is certain, by the viewing public around the world, he will be greatly missed. Next week, we ask our panel of political pundits to reassemble to point the way forward on Brexit. If the Prime Minister finally secures assent for his proposals from the House of Commons, can we finally clear the decks for a general election? Or is there yet more political shocks to come? But now, from Alex and me and all at the show, it's goodbye, and we hope to see you next week.